Good morning. This is Northern Light for Monday, August 28th. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe.
A violent incident at the Essex County Fair's demolition derby in Westport last weekend is raising questions about police use of force.
If they would have came over and been like, hey, just walk off the track, shut your car off, walk off the track, I would have been like, okay, let's do it. Let me shut my car off. They didn't really give me an option to do anything but get out of your car and get on the ground.
Meanwhile, the sheriff's office insists the officer acted appropriately. More from Kara Chapman coming up.
Also, Governor Hochul is stepping up her criticism of President Biden over the state's migrant crisis.
This crisis originated with the federal government, and it must be resolved through the federal government.
This comes as Governor Hochul faces plunging poll numbers.
And we'll meet one North Country art curator and talk with her about her favorite piece at her gallery. All of that and more is just ahead on Northern Light. Stick with us.
Broadcast of Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio is supported by the Village Mercantile in Saranac Lake, established in 2011 with a mission of community-fueled solutions. With products for home, camp, and gift-giving, villagemerc.com, anything but general. And by Apothecary Chocolates, making gourmet chocolates by hand from all natural herbs, botanicals, and tree syrups, apothecarychocolates.com.
This is Northern Light. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe. Governor Kathy Hochul has finalized a 4-year labor agreement with the union that represents SUNY system employees. The United University Professions includes 37,000 SUNY faculty and staff across the state. The ratified contract includes yearly staff increases, lump sum bonuses, and up to 12 weeks of fully paid parental leave. It also includes changes to the health insurance program to keep costs down for employees. Union President Frederick Cole said in a statement that the contract is rich in gains for all members. And Governor Hochul and the contract reflects the important contributions of SUNY faculty and staff. The newly ratified contract will run through the summer of 2026.
The St. Regis Mohawk tribe has received $1.3 million from opioid settlements with large pharmaceutical companies. The tribe was part of a nationwide suit which alleged that pharmaceutical manufacturers and distributors knowingly created an addiction epidemic that has done enormous harm to tribal communities. In 2018, the St. Regis Mohawk tribe estimated that around 95% of child welfare cases were connected to opioid abuse and addiction. In a statement, Tribal Chief Beverly Cook said that, quote, an entire generation of tribal members are growing up in the shadow of an opioid epidemic. The tribe says it will use the money to support programs that help individuals dealing with addiction and on cultural activities that aim to heal the Akwesasne community. There are still settlement negotiations in process with other manufacturers, so additional payments may be coming.
A violent incident at the demolition derby in Westport last weekend is raising questions about police use of force. An Essex County Sheriff's deputy dragged a driver out of his stock car after he yelled at judges. The sheriff says his officer's actions were appropriate. Champlain Valley reporter Kara Chapman has more.
Video obtained by NCPR shows driver Devin Fournier getting out of his banged-up car, standing on the hood, and yelling at an official during a heat at last weekend's demolition derby at the Essex County Fair. He then climbs down and keeps yelling. Arguing with the judges isn't allowed. We reached Fournier Thursday. He says he disagreed with the officials' calls.
After I knew that they weren't going to let me keep running, I was like, screw it. I'll just shut my car off or drive my car off the track is what I was trying to do.
It's what happened next that caught people's attention. The video shows Fournier walking back to his car, taking off his helmet and throwing it inside. As he walks around the front, Sergeant Justin Bobby with the Essex County Sheriff's Office approaches him. The two exchange words for a second as Fournier starts to get back into his car through the driver's side window. The sergeant reaches for Fournier's arm and he whips around. Then the sergeant grabs the back of his neck and pulls him down. The crowd roars. As the two struggle, Fournier holds on to the window frame until another deputy walks up and pulls his hand off. Sergeant Bobby drags him to the ground. Another video shows the sergeant trying to bring Fournier's arm behind his back and kneeling on Fournier to keep him down. As this happens, two more deputies walk over. Fournier and Sergeant Bobby can then be seen talking to each other for a moment, with Fournier still on the ground and gesturing towards the exit. The sergeant helps him up, and someone in the crowd heckles the deputies. The four officers follow Fournier as he walks off the track to the infield. Fournier steps over the cement barrier, then turns back to the crowd to take a bow before walking off. NCPR called Essex County Sheriff David Reynolds about the incident. He says, based on the video he's seen and what first responders who were there have said, he thinks Sergeant Bobby made the right call when he pulled Fournier from his vehicle.
I don't want to speak for the deputy, but I think his mindset was he's pretty irate. I'm not going to let him get back in this car, and weaponize this 4,000-pound vehicle.
Reynolds says he doesn't believe there was an excessive use of force. He says if he thought there was, he would consult his department policies and follow a procedure that could result in Sergeant Bobby's suspension or termination. Fournier says he's seen deputies walk people off the track at derbies and tell them to go home. But he says he hasn't seen people getting ripped out of their cars and slammed on the ground.
I really didn't do anything wrong to deserve that. I mean, if they would have came over and been like, hey, just walk off the track, shut your car off, walk off the track, I would have been like, okay, let's do it. Let me shut my car off. They didn't really give me an option to do anything but get out of your car and get on the ground.
Reynolds insists that Fournier was given the opportunity to leave before Sergeant Bobby pulled him out of his car.
Our main goal is safety, and he was going to get in that car. Maybe he wouldn't do anything, but we don't know that. And at that point, he was not listening to the race officials or the deputies.
Fournier says the back of his knees were ripped up, and he's got a bruise on his back from the incident. Reynolds says none of his deputies were injured. Fournier wasn't charged with anything after the deputies walked him off the track. According to Sheriff Reynolds, his officers have discretion when it comes to whether they arrest someone.
I don't think the guy was intentionally doing anything, towards the deputy or anybody. He was just agitated.
The sheriff says at this point he thinks it's a closed incident. Fournier says people have told him he has the right to press charges and should contact a lawyer. But he says overall he's trying to move past it.
I've been thinking about it, but it's kind of over and done with. The way I see it is what it is. Move past it. What's done is done.
Fournier says he plans to keep competing in demolition derbies. Sheriff Reynolds says his department does trainings around use of force, crisis intervention, and de-escalation. Pete Nelson is a co-founder of the Adirondack Diversity Initiative, which has connected Reynolds and his officers to trainings that focus on diversity and implicit bias.
In general, I think that when there's a stronger tie between police and communities, everybody benefits. And I want to stress that that's a two-way street.
Nelson says that means police and communities work to increase their understanding of each other. As for the demolition derby incident, Nelson says the Adirondack Diversity Initiative has not taken a position on the video. Speaking for himself, he says he has no comment, except to say that videos are important but don't tell the whole story. Nelson says he does not think the video presents a setback to the work the initiative has been doing to establish that two-way street between police and communities.
I think that this is difficult stuff. People are affected by police incidents, the people who are victims, the people who are suspects, the people who are witnesses, and the police officers themselves. There's nothing about this that is easy. And I think it's very important that there be intelligent dialogue.
Nelson says understanding is the ultimate goal because it's directly related to everyone's safety. Kara Chapman, North Country Public Radio.
Listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. 9 minutes past 8. Good morning. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Coming up, art curators at our North Country galleries work to create a space that invites gallery goers to experience something new. We don't often hear from curators about the art in their collections that are striking to them. Well, we do that today. Coming up in just a few minutes here on Northern Light.
music by Mark Corey out of Watertown. Check out more of his music. Part of our Underscore project. Check it out at ncpr.org/underscore. Northern Light is supported by St. Lawrence Health, committed to keeping the community healthy and safe by providing vaccines for patients to strengthen their defenses. stlawrencehealthsystem.org. And Adirondack Experience, the museum on Blue Mountain Lake, presenting a full season of events and activities, now open 7 days a week. Tickets at the adkx.org.
The New York Department of Health found that asthma-related emergency room visits increased about 80% statewide in early June when smoke from Canadian wildfires caused poor air quality across the state. A study conducted by the Department of Health found that asthma-related emergency visits in the Eastern Lake Ontario and Central regions more than doubled. The Adirondack was the only region in the state with less than a 35% increase in emergency visits. The Department of Health says that as wildfire smoke events become more frequent and widespread, the general public will need to monitor air quality conditions and respond accordingly.
An athlete publicizing his journey down the Hudson River will pay a penalty for using a drone in the Adirondack High Peaks Wilderness area. Lewis Pugh is swimming the full length of the Hudson River to raise awareness about climate change, but someone from his support team used a drone to document Pugh's progress in the high peaks. That's illegal in wilderness areas across New York. Pugh's team was hit with 2 violations of the DEC regulations for operating motorized equipment and for commercial filming on state lands without a permit. Those violations come with a $200 civil penalty.
Governor Kathy Hochul delivered a live-streamed address last week to showcase how she's handling the state's migrant crisis. As Karen DeWitt reports, Hochul is stepping up her messaging on the controversial issue as her popularity has taken a hit in a recent statewide poll.
I'm speaking to you today so you're aware of what your state government is doing to address the unprecedented migrant crisis.
Hochul said she wanted to tell New Yorkers directly about what she's doing to resolve a crisis caused by the influx of over 100,000 asylum seekers to the state in the past several months. The governor says she's freed up space in state buildings and helped New York City designate over 200 shelters to house migrants, allocated $1 billion in the state budget, and deployed over 2,000 National Guard troops to help. The governor named others who she blames for the crisis. She says Texas Governor Greg Abbott, a Republican who has bused the migrants to New York City, is partially responsible, but she also called out President Joe Biden, a Democratic ally of Hochul's, who so far has largely not responded to her repeated requests for help.
This crisis originated with the federal government, and it must be resolved through the federal government.
Specifically, Hochul wants a waiver of the 6-month waiting period before the asylum seekers are allowed to seek employment. She says she also wants more funding from the president and Congress to reimburse New York's costs, which she says could rise to $4.5 billion next year. Hochul did not cover any new ground in her speech. She's told reporters for months now that she's been speaking to the White House on a daily basis, asking for the work waivers and the financial assistance. Earlier in the week, a Siena College poll found that Hochul's favorability rating is the lowest it's been during her 2-year tenure as governor. Siena pollster Steve Greenberg says that New Yorkers of all political viewpoints, including most Democrats, believe the influx of migrants to the state is a serious problem.
Certainly, her handling of the migrant issue does not help her numbers.
The governor also rallied many of the state's congressional and local elected officials to support her stance. Her aides sent out a news release highlighting comments from them, also from other organizations like the state's Restaurant Association and groups that work with refugees. Noticeably absent, though, New York City Mayor Eric Adams. The governor and mayor, who've been allies on many issues, have seen their relationship fray over the migrant crisis. 2 major advocacy groups that did not sign on are the state's Legal Aid Society and the Coalition for the Homeless. Both groups have filed a lawsuit trying to expand New York City's right to shelter policy to the rest of the state. They argue the state's constitution requires it. Hochul disagrees. She's opposing them in court. Josh Goldfein, staff attorney for Legal Aid, credits Hochul, though, for focusing greater attention on the migrant crisis and putting more pressure on the president and Congress to take more responsibility.
The governor is trying to raise the profile of the issue. Maybe she doesn't need to say something different than what she said. She just needs to say it in a different way to get people's attention.
Goldfein's group, along with several others, wrote a letter to Hochul urging her to do more to settle the migrants in regions outside of New York City. Goldfein says the governor could use her executive powers to override local emergency orders that ban the asylum seekers.
What we need is for the governor to really take ownership of some of these issues and show some leadership to help people relocate to the communities that need an influx of people and that would welcome new arrivals.
Hochul, in her speech, said she won't force other parts of the state to shelter migrants. The busing of asylum seekers to regions in the Hudson Valley and the Albany, Rochester, and Buffalo areas has been politically unpopular. In Albany, I'm Karen DeWitt.
You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Coming up, we pay a visit to the Remington Museum to hear about one curator's favorite piece there. Then stick around after the show for Bird Note coming up at 8:42. But first, Todd has a look at the weather for us.
Highs today across the region in the 70s, a mix of sun, clouds, and occasional rain, partly cloudy. In the Tug Hill, Lowville, Boonville, Thousand Islands, Watertown, those communities with highs mid-70s, light winds out of the south-southeast. In the St. Lawrence Valley, the Weather Service says partly to mostly sunny, highs mid to upper 70s, light winds out of the south-southeast. For much of the Adirondacks, partly cloudy with occasional showers, and that includes also places like Glens Falls and Saratoga Springs with some light rain showers, highs near 80 in Glens Falls, mid-70s for highs in the Adirondacks. Tomorrow, occasional showers across the region, then partly cloudy Wednesday, and then sunshine on Thursday and Friday. Right now, partly sunny in Canton, 58 degrees.
The North Country has a rich culture of artists and galleries. I think of the SUNY Plattsburgh Art Museum, the Shirt Factory in Glens Falls, and the gallery at the Chestertown Public Library. And the curators there work to create spaces that invite gallery goers to experience something new and be moved by the work. But we don't often hear from curators about the art in their collections that are striking to them. I recently stopped by the Remington Museum in Ogdensburg to talk with curator Laura Desmond and Mohawk painter Dave Fadden. The gallery there showcases the work of the 19th century artist Frederick Remington, who painted a lot of images of cowboys and indigenous men and cavalry. And Laura Desmond walked me over to a lively pen and ink gouache work by Remington of an indigenous man on horseback. It's called Buffalo Hunter Spitting a Bullet into a Gun. And she told me it's her favorite piece in the whole collection. This story does mention suicide. It's about 6 minutes long. Again, here is Desmond's favorite piece, Buffalo Hunter Spitting a Bullet into a Gun.
And the horse is at full gallop, all 4 feet off the ground, tucked up underneath the horse. And the man is like bafflingly, right, for anybody who wouldn't know what's going on, he's got the barrel of a rifle in his mouth as he rides. Frederick Remington has written in ink underneath this, Buffalo Hunter Spitting a Bullet into a Gun. And so this is a way that they say that in a pinch you can reload a musket is by spitting the ball down the barrel as opposed to having to basically dismount to use your ramrod to stick the ball down the barrel of the gun. this was an illustration for Francis Parkman's Oregon Trail, and there's a description of this happening. So the person who encountered this artwork in the book would have known what's going on, right? But that said, right, when you encounter it just on the walls of a museum, you're like, what's going on in this painting? It's so dynamic. I mean, it's full of energy and movement, right? Like this horse is it's sort of suspended like a merry-go-round horse, but at the same time, you know that it's, just driving forward, and the figure has this beautiful balance, but then, right, I mean, you're also looking at it, and it's a suggestive image of suicide, right? I mean, but it also looks like he's, like blowing.
That's what I thought. I thought he was making a bugle sound out of the rifle. Oh no, he's reloading. But he's flying. He's literally flying through the air, following the buffalo. Yeah. But when I first saw that, that's what I thought it was, a bugle. And I'm like, oh, that's a rifle. What's going on here?
And I love the horse's tail is this like swoop that goes up that emphasizes the movement, and the fringe on the leather clothing of the buffalo hunter is also flying in the wind. So yeah, flying is the perfect word to describe this figure. So it's both like magical but also scary, I think is why I like it so much.
And his posture, he's maintaining that posture and staying on the horse, and reloading with both arms up in the air. Just you can almost hear the roar of the buffaloes he's chasing, and then he looks calm too. He's just calmly reloading his rifle, going 100 miles an hour.
It's a favorite type for Remington, like the incredible competence, like that you stay calm, cool, and collected in the midst of a chaotic situation. He's so good at it, and it's so awe-inspiring, really, these figures. Because as Dave just said, like you think about like, oh, you're in the middle of a buffalo hunt, right? Like all of these giant creatures thundering across the plain. And, he's got the sculpture, the Stampede, in the next room there. It's the same thing. Like all these cattle are bumping up against this rider who's like just perfectly balanced on horseback. And Remington just has such a love of that kind of skill. He never, ever tired of it. So.
And you gave light to it there with some of the emotion in it. But just to ask again, why for you is this your favorite piece? What draws you to it?
I think I also, like Remington, I enjoy representations of that kind of competence. But I think I like the suggestion of the darker undertone, right? I mean, I see this figure as one of his mixed race figures. And, I think that Remington was very aware of the suppression and sometimes eradication of indigenous culture. And he knew that the destruction of the buffalo was a cultural tragedy, that it wasn't just an environmental tragedy. It was a cultural tragedy. And so I feel like that suggestion of death that's there is Remington's expression of that knowledge too. And so it's an important message, even if it's, it's a dark message. And so he's like simultaneously showing the incredible appreciation and awe of the horsemanship here, but acknowledging the darkness of what's going on.
And you'd seem very moved or sort of lit up at this piece too. I don't want to project that onto you, but I wondered what it was what personally.
Well, it's just a simple piece. It's not very large. It's very small, but it says a lot. Just the movement alone grabbed me. His posture, and what he's doing. I was just like, what's going on here? And it just drew me in the background as well. The gouache just makes the whole thing pop. And so for a smaller piece, it just says so much, and that's what really drew me in.
That was Laura Desmond and Dave Fadden talking about their favorite piece at the Remington, Buffalo Hunter Spitting a Bullet into a Gun. Again, you can check out that on display now at the museum. And if you head over to the museum tomorrow to look at it, the Remington is also hosting a conversation about another of Remington's works. The museum is hosting Art Highlights and Tea tomorrow. It begins with a presentation by Desmond on Remington's plein air painting, to be followed by an elegant tea in the museum parlors. It's part of the North Country Arts Festival, a 10-day celebration of the arts organized by the St. Lawrence County Arts Council. The talk happens at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon at the museum. It's free and open to the public and will be presented in the museum's Tiffany Room. You can find out more from the Frederick Remington Art Museum.
It's 8:26, and this is Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. There is the Canton chapter of the Silent Book Club welcoming you to come and read with them every last Monday of the month. That would be tonight, 6 to 7:30 at the ODY Library on the St. Lawrence University campus. Bring your latest read or browse and borrow a book when you arrive. The Silent Book Club in Canton, inviting you to join them tonight to come and read with everyone in the same room from 6 to 7:30 at the ODY Library at St. Lawrence University. The Silent Book Club.
Shh. Yes.
Well, we're telling you about it. But yeah.
And don't forget, too, that NCPR is the media sponsor for the Teddy Roosevelt Weekend coming up September 8th through the 10th in Newcomb. You can celebrate Roosevelt's historic visit to the region with a weekend of family-friendly events, including games, live music, crafting, and a visit from Teddy Roosevelt impersonator Joe Wygand. For more information, you can visit our website, ncpr.org/calendar.
Also, don't forget Northern Current, a community music festival coming up on September 3rd. That's Sunday from noon to 9 at Riverside Park in Saranac Lake. You'll hear an eclectic lineup that includes rock, blues, Afrobeat, jazz, country, and more. Bywater Call, Sagi and the Po' Boys, Coletta and Super Yamba Band, High and the Hog, regional groups there as well. For more information, check out our website, ncpr.org/calendar. This is rain or shine, and there's also going to be food vendors and a kids' activity zone. Should be a lot of fun. That's Northern Current, a community music festival, Sunday, September 3rd from noon to 9, Riverside Park in Saranac Lake. And again, check our website, our calendar page for more information, ncpr.org.
That is it for the show for the day. Morning Edition continues in just a couple of minutes. After that, stick around for the Marketplace Morning Report coming up between 8:51 and 9 o'clock, where you'll get caught up on all the morning's business news. And if you miss an episode of Northern Light, don't worry. You can listen back to the archive any place you get your podcasts. While you're there, subscribe to our daily news roundup, The Story of the Day, where you'll hear the biggest stories in our region and get the latest on the day's news, all hosted by the one and only David Summerstein. You can also listen live to Story of the Day every weekday afternoon at 5:48 right here on NCPR.
Keep up with NCPR throughout the day, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can also email us, news@ncpr.org. Our theme music is by Danny Thomas, who lives right here in Canton. Till tomorrow, I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Be well.